Hey, your rates. Today we're going to be talking about types of data, and I'm going to do this lesson kind of it's going to be a little bit not mathy. I'll have moments, but I'm going to do a lot of this writing by hand. So just forgive the messiness of my writing. I'm writing by hand or by finger on a screen. So I'll try my best for neatness, but as I go, I'll try to make sure that I'm being neat. So we're going to get into data. And this is kind of a vocabulary lesson. We're going to set the stage with some vocabulary. So let's start out with a variable. This is an important term. So make sure that you're kind of following along and taking these notes down in your book. But a variable is something measurable. It's something measurable or observable. So that's an R right there, observable. Observable, that is expected to change over time. You can also look at it to change over time or between observations. Observations. Sorry, I just had a spelling moment there. This so far matches pretty clearly what the definition of variables would be if you're talking about variables for scientific inquiry in your science classes. We're going to start getting with the math side of it, but sometimes when you think about it, people would look at opinion. So one of the a common metric for data and variables is sometimes we look at the public opinion of different political people. So Scott Morrison being the current Prime Minister of Australia, even the opinion of Scott Morrison over time, whether it's weekly or monthly, kind of is something that can be observed as a variable. During the forest fire, I will note myself, not knowing anything about Australian politics, that it seemed like Scott Morrison was not very popular, and some things that he was saying and doing were not very popular things. And I think over the course recently of the pandemic, he seems to have improved his overall public opinion, just from an outsider observing kind of some politics. But yeah, political opinion is one and a variable that's something that can be observed in terms of data people see over time. And public opinion is definitely one that's a pretty easy one to kind of look at, observe, and be able to kind of survey in different ways. So the other thing about variables, and this is where we're going to start to branch off from science a bit, but variables, I'm going to get more than the math side of it, but variables can be discrete or continuous. Discrete or continuous. All right, so that's kind of a good place to start. I'm just going to flip my page. So this is a good time to pause if you want to just finish up writing. I'm going to get to a new page. So just, sorry if you're like, I'm not done writing. Just pause the recording, make sure you can get what you need. So I'm going to kind of draw you a little bit of a mind map of how I like to visualize this. Say variables. So you have variables, which are a type of data. Variables can be numerical. Variables can also be categorical. So numerical, hopefully you see the thought or the idea of numbers in there. So numerical kind of means numbers. There's two different types of numbers that can be discrete. D, sorry. It can be discrete, it can be continuous. Variables could also be categorical. Categorical. So an example of, I'll kind of go through this a little bit more detail in a second, but numerical variables are things you can measure. So they're usually quantitative. We can use numbers to kind of measure them. Categorical are things that you can collect, such as hair color or gender, brand of car. Those would be all examples of categorical data. So you got categorical data, you have numerical data, and it makes me want to actually go back to my last slide. And I think I should have said variables can be discrete or continuous. Sorry, I should have said variables should have been. And sorry, I kind of got this wrong. It was kind of bugging me in the back of the head. Variables can be numerical or categorical. Yeah, I feel better about that. Sorry about that, everybody. So just adjust your notes to reflect that, but variables can be numerical or categorical. So there's kind of a way of thinking about variables. Variables are numerical or categorical, and two types of numerical variables are discrete and continuous. So let's get into more detail here with this. I just wish I could add new pages. That's all I wish with this program. So I could add new pages. I can write neatly, and I have another one that can add pages, but my handwriting doesn't show up as nice. So if we were to think about numerical data, numerical data is also thought of as quantitative. I know in science we use the term quantitative and qualitative. In math we use numerical and categorical. So there's numerical data, and there's two types. And the first type would be discrete. Yeah, so messy, sorry. C-R-E-T-E, discrete. A discrete is can only be defined or outlined in whole number values. So they can only be certain or particular usually whole, A-L-L, usually whole numbers. Usually whole numbers. I'll close my bracket there. So like you could talk about the members of a household would be an example of discrete data. You have whole numbers to measure the number of people in a household. Some people live in a house of 3, some people live in a house of 7, some people live in a house of 4. Those would be all examples of discrete data because you will expect to get whole number of values. You can also have continuous. Continuous data can be any value in a range. So this can be a value, sorry, that's a little messy, a value in a range. For example, temperature. So I think tonight it's going to be like 1.2 degrees Celsius. The height of a person could be 172.4 centimeters, or if you want to be very, very accurate, you could say 172.21 centimeters. These would be examples of things that are continuous and that you can really get very picky about, the exact value. So like, I'll just say with discrete, you'd have a 4-person household. And then, your height could be 172.4 centimeters. And those would be examples of discrete and continuous data. Categorical data, so let me just get a new page going here. Oops, why am I typing categorical? Sorry. With the next kind of, I use too many pages, I get going, like, I just break this program. It's awesome, but I'm just wishing it worked a little bit more the way I wanted to. With categorical data, it is not numerical. It could be things like colors, genders, brands of cars. Ugh, that doesn't look like an R at all. Let's see if I can undo my way to make that look like an R. Oh, there we go. Colors, gender, car type are all examples of categorical data. Sometimes in a survey, people could use a rating, for example, so like 1 for dislike, 2 for neutral, 3 for like. That could also be examples. So it can be words. That would be like yellow, female, Holden would be all examples of words, or ratings. So i.e. 1 equals dislike. 2 is neutral, 3 is like. That would be an example of a rating that you can think of for categorical data. So that would be kind of where I'm going to start. I'm going to stop this video. I'm going to insert, oh, actually, you know what? I can actually keep going. I can talk about data types. Sorry. Canvas, and then I'll do some examples. Data can be, data can come from different sources. The two main sources are primary sources and secondary sources. So you have primary sources and secondary sources. Primary sources tend to be first-hand information that you collect from the original source by a person or organization. Secondary source has been connected, published, and then summarized by someone else before we actually use it. So sometimes it's second-hand sources like newspaper articles, textbook, internet, blogs, all are examples of secondary sources. So let me just kind of on that. Let's see if I got enough room here. So primary. Let's see if I can squash that in here. So primary is collected from the source. Ooh, that's not a S, that's a C. From the source by the original source. Say that ORIGINAL, the original source by the person needing the data. Secondary sources are collected from I'm trying to think of another way, like other from other media. When I say media, it means not just the news, but it could be the internet, it could be textbooks, it could be newspaper articles, it could be internet blogs, and it's considered to be secondhand data. So you're getting it from another source and not directly from yourself. So other media, so that could be news, books, I'm trying to think here. The Bureau of Statistics. If you're getting it from them, that could be another example. Internet. Try to get this to fit. Are all example of secondary source material. The last part I could talk about, and then we can get into some examples, would be samples and populations. Last one. Samples and population. Okay. So when an entire population is surveyed, it's called a census. Actually worked for the census back in Canada. In 2006, I'd finished university, was looking for a job, so I helped out the Canadian government actually do a complete census. I worked and collected surveys from people who had not yet turned them in. When an entire population, so we were surveying the population of Canada, is surveyed. We could do a survey of the entire population of students who attend Orange High School, and that would be a census of Orange High School, for example. That'd be another example. When an entire population is surveyed, it is called a census. Sorry, I'm trying to write neatly. The other thing you need to know is when a part or a subject of the population is surveyed, it's called a sample. So, surveying everybody under the age of 18 would be a sample group, and that would be a sample of the total population, and a sample would be people under 18. When a subset or group of the population is surveyed, it is called a sample. A sample. Samples should be randomly selected, so usually, you can't usually sample every single person under the age of 18. So you pick usually some kind of random sampling method to be able to kind of get a good distribution of different people within that sample group. So and there's lots of different ways to do it, but you're trying to get that overall opinion or idea or trend within that subset or sample group. So just to kind of quickly make sure that I go over the important parts, make sure you know what a sample is. Make sure what a census is. Make sure that you know the difference between a primary and secondary source. Make sure that you know the different types of data. There is categorical data and there is numerical data. Make sure to know the two types of numerical data. There is discrete data and there's continuous data. Make sure you kind of understand the big picture of kind of how this all fits together. And finally, make sure you know, oh, did I crash this one? I probably crashed this slide. I don't even know if I can find variables anymore. Ooh, I can't. And make sure finally you know what a variable is. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple examples. I'll attach those as a separate video so you can see those. And otherwise, that is our lesson on the vocabulary for today. Take care.